Good evening and welcome to the Cabarrus County Board of Education's called meeting for Tuesday, January the 19th, 2022. I will say welcome to our viewing audience that's joining us live stream, and I will call the meeting to order and ask that all that are here please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Board members, I need a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Blackwell, a second by Mr. Furr. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. I just want to let the viewing audience know that we have Ms. Adcock that is joining us as well. Ms. Adcock, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for joining us online. And with that, we will move to discussion items under 4.01 is our Test to Stay program, and I will turn it over to Dr. Kapicki.
Just real quick, before we bring John Basleys up to go over the Test to Stay program, I just want to announce that we will be closed tomorrow for school due to the inclement weather. Many of the secondary roads are still not taken care of. We have a lot of problems in our parking lots with ice, and just for the safety of our students, our staff, and everybody concerned, we will be closed tomorrow. I would just ask staff to follow the email directions that they are given to look at those guidelines that they should be following. But again, we will be off tomorrow due to the weather. Thank you. Mr. Basleys?
And as Mr. Basleys is making his way to the podium, I'll also, board members, we are going to cancel and look at a rescheduled date for our retreat or our planning session on Saturday. So we will be discussing that Monday on the 24th call meeting. Mr. Basleys.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm here to update you on the Test to Stay program. When we last met, I updated you on the most recent changes to the toolkit, which included a revision that very day on the Test to Stay program. Tonight we'll be able to give you some more in-depth information on the Test to Stay program. So this is a fairly benign slide, but it just says Test to Stay programs. What I need to make you all aware of is there are in fact two options for Test to Stay for any school system in Cabarrus County, in the state of North Carolina. So historically, Cabarrus County Schools has been enrolled in the ABC Science Collaborative's Test to Stay program. More recently, with the last iteration of the toolkit, North Carolina expanded an option for any school district that's in a universally masked situation, universally masked settings, can be in their own Test to Stay program. That Test to Stay program, I'll differentiate that in just a minute, is a little bit different than the program that's run by Duke. As you all will recall, this is the slide that I shared with you all at our last meeting, and that was the most recent update at the time that specified the exemption from quarantines for any students who were in a Test to Stay program and in a universally masked situation. So here I want to break out a few things that are different. So you'll see in that upper right quadrant where it says NCDHS Toolkit, that is the new option that was presented to us last week. That is in fact the Test to Stay program that Cabarrus County Schools is currently involved in. All right. A few distinctions is that the ABC Science Collaborative program requires 2 tests, whereas the toolkit version recommends 2 tests on days 1 and 5. It also says if there's a lack of testing available, we prioritize athletes because of the level of exposure that athletes sometimes have. One of the other elements of the toolkit version of the Test to State program is that we are not required to have the approval of our local health department to participate in the toolkit version of the Test to State program. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be working closely and hand in hand with our partners at the Health Alliance. It just means that we do not need their approval to be involved in this program. It allows for our students and staff who have school exposures as well as community exposures to remain at school. It only eliminates those students who are positive, symptomatic, or who live with somebody who's positive or symptomatic. Okay, so in the past it would have been school-based exposures and community exposures would have had to go home and quarantine. Now it's only for students who are positive, symptomatic, or who live with somebody who is positive or symptomatic. That's a very big change for us. So you might ask, why are we doing this? Why are we bothering to present this information to you? So one thing that I want to make very clear is that we are currently in a universal masking or mask mandated setting, right? By the vote of this board, and this board has the option of voting to make masking optional as well. What I want to point out to us is that we do not, under the toolkit, have any option for mask optional participation in their version of a toolkit, their version of a Test to State program. If we go mask optional, the only opportunity for us to be involved in Test to Stay would be with the Science Collaborative. And as I think you all recall at the beginning of the month, the Health Alliance has shared that they at this point are unable to support our involvement in a mask optional program and being in the Science Collaborative's Test to Stay program. So I just wanted to make sure that we made those distinctions and made that as clear as I could to you guys. I'm sure you'll have questions about that, and so I'll be prepared to come back to this slide in just a moment. It's a lot of information on one slide. It's a lot to digest, so I'm sure we'll talk more about it. So just a reminder on exclusions and quarantines under this new toolkit. Those exclusions, the times that are out of school, are for confirmed positive COVID-19 students and staff, for those exposed to COVID positive people within their household as close contacts, as well as those who become symptomatic, and then anyone with symptoms of COVID-19. So again, the long and the short of it, under the Test to Stay program that we're currently involved in, students are only required to be home if they're positive, symptomatic, or live with someone who is either of those. Okay? In terms of days out of school, we need to think in terms of those 5 days. Previously, I was saying 5 and 5, right? 5 days out and then 5 days back wearing a mask. Currently, since we're universally masked, the 5 days wearing a mask is implied, right? So we're just saying 5 days out, and that's just for those people who have household-based close contacts, those who are COVID positive, and then those who are symptomatic. For positive people who don't have symptoms, we count those 5 days from the date of their test. For symptomatic people, we count the date of symptom onset, provided they've gone 24 hours with being fever-free. Okay. I also wanted to update you all, board members. You may be very well aware of this, but I thought this would be a good time to remind you all and to certainly educate the public. As you've heard Mrs. Grimsley speak in the last few weeks about the task force reconvening to revisit the metrics. The task force has met. We had a really, I'd say, very productive meeting in which we talked about some of the considerations for revisiting the metrics. Those included looking at the scale of the school-based standards, trying to determine if an even number of metrics confounded our decision-making, and also trying to figure out if there should be additional metrics added to the metrics process that we have in place. I know that the metrics group themselves will be meeting tomorrow. The entire task force will meet yet again, and by the time we meet again in front of you all, we hope to be able to give you all a submission at that time for your review and consideration. All right, so thank you, and I'm here for your questions.
So board members, just in the sake of time for tonight to get to the ESSER report, we're going to move this to the agenda on Monday night because we really do not have updates on numbers yet. Kids have been out of school. Staff members have now not been there because of weather. So let's just move the discussion items, if we will, to Monday night on the 24th, if that's good for you,
Great.
Mr. Bassley.
Great for me. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Piggy, unless you have an issue with that?
Just a quick question. So we are in the test to stay program,
Yes, correct.
but
So
it's this other one.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Okay, with that being said, we will have Dr. Kopicki with 4.2 on staff incentive program. And actually, we will do this one together, but I will let you get started first.
Sure. So I think before we get into any kind of conversation on incentives, what I'd like to do is to give you an overview of the ESSER funding up to date as to just refreshing the board on the funding that you've received on the ESSER 1, 2, and 3, what you committed to spend through the board action back in April of 2021, and kind of an update as to where we are at this point in time on January 18, 2022. So our new CFO, Carol Herndon, has a brief presentation to kind of share some of that information with you. And at the end, if you have any questions, you could ask myself, Carol, or Dr. Bish, because she kind of blends into this a little bit too with some of the personnel issues. So, Ms. Herndon, if you would please begin your presentation, I'd appreciate it.
Good evening, Board. Thank you for the opportunity to share this ESSER funding update with you all tonight. As a reminder, the ESSER funding has come to our district really in three large buckets: ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3. And you'll see on this chart a recap of the allotment that we received, the spending to date, the available remaining balance, the spending deadline, and then an acknowledgement that our planning budget is already fully committed through the presentation that was made to the board in April of 2001 and the board's decision to approve the budget as submitted to DPI. So let's take a look at ESSER 1. We received an allotment of just under $3.5 million, and we have spent that entire allotment. So we're not going to talk about ESSER 1 any further tonight unless you have related questions, because there's no funding available to spend. I'd rather spend the time talking about ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 if that's okay with the board. ESSER 2, we received just over $13 million in the ESSER 2 allotment. We've spent just about $7 million, and that's a 53% spend rate of the ESSER 2 money. And we have just over $6 million remaining to spend in that bucket. Those dollars have to be spent in their entirety by September 30th, 2023, and we have submitted a plan on how to spend all of that money, including the remaining balance. The plan that was approved by the board, we've submitted that to DPI, and they approved that plan. For ESSER 3, which was the final big bucket of funding for the COVID relief, we received almost $30 million. We've spent about 21% of those funded dollars, or $6.4 million, with $23.4 remaining to spend. And we have until September 30th, 2024 to fully spend the ESSER 3 allotment. So I just want to reiterate that our application to DPI about how we plan to spend those monies was submitted and approved in May-June timeframe of 2021, and we've been working against that planned spending ever since. So a bit of a reminder, because ESSER funding is complex and is loaded with lots of federal rules and regulations regarding how you go about getting approval to spend and how you make any changes to that plan of approved spending going forward. The ESSER funding does require a formal application to DPI. So it wasn't like they said, you've got this money, go off and spend it. We had to create a plan of how we intended to spend these dollars. That was based on a needs assessment of where we had the most need within our district, and we had to create a budget to support that plan, and that was all a part of our application that went to DPI in the May-June 2021 timeframe. Any changes to that approved plan, and all of our ESSER plans and budgets were approved by DPI, any changes to that plan does require a formal budget amendment submitted to DPI for approval. So we can't change the game, if you will, in the middle of the process. Can we apply for a budget amendment and get approval? Absolutely, but we have to follow the formal process to do so. And since all of our ESSER funding is committed to a current plan and budget, we would have to have conversations about what we are not going to do that's active in the current plan and budget in order to make room for a different way of spending, all contingent on submitting that budget amendment for approval by DPI. And just as a reminder, because I keep this in the back of my head all the time when considering ESSER funds, there is a fairly non-negotiable three-pronged test when assessing the appropriateness of spending ESSER funding, and it goes like this. In order to be authorized, it needs to be in prevention of COVID, so for example, the purchase of PPE to protect our students and staff, or in response to COVID, going remote like we did in March of 2020, and making sure that our students and our staff were prepared with devices and curriculum to be able to provide meaningful instruction remotely, and then as a result of COVID. And that would be what we are experiencing from a learning loss perspective, and how do we address that for our students. So this is a high-level overview of the board-approved initial application and budget for both ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. So you'll see the description of the spending, and then the summary of the budgeted amounts for each of the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funding sources. And so I'll just walk through these at a high level, and of course, please ask me any questions that you might have. So we made a decision to fund out of ESSER 2 an increase in our teacher supplement effective this school year, 2021-2022, moving that teacher supplement from 10% to 12% for 3 years starting in 2021-2022, with the understanding and conversations with our county that they would pick up that tab starting in the year 2024-2025. And we're continuing those conversations with the county today. We also, from an ESSER 3 perspective, and ESSER 2 as well, added some additional instructional resources, 37 classroom teachers, in order to have smaller class sizes, more one-on-one time with our students. That's another way to address learning loss, if you will, and 22 MTSS support personnel to help with not only learning loss, but some of the mental and social health gaps that are showing up in our students as well. We also, through ESSER 3, plan to increase our ESL teacher allotments and our EC teacher allotments, again, to put more instructional resources in front of our students in order to help deal with learning loss, have smaller class sizes, more one-on-one time with our students. Likewise, 10 positions to support specialized instructional support personnel. Again, this is an effort to make sure we have the right resources to address the proliferation of mental and social health gaps, in addition to learning gaps for our students. We also budgeted to hire a professional development coordinator. Now more than ever, we need to make sure that we have a very tight professional development plan, particularly as we are asking our teachers and the remainder of our staff to do new tasks and duties in the face of a pandemic. We also included in our budget additional break-fix resources because in a remote learning environment, we're highly dependent on devices that students are taking home with them, and this is to make sure that those devices remain usable and working during this time. And then we also made a provision to hire some additional support folks, mental health data analysts, an EC mental health clinician, and a secondary academic advisement specialist. All folks that, again, would be positions that would help support serving our students in the middle of the pandemic. Finally, last page, in ESTHER 2, we also funded the 6% bonus paid to classified staff that the board approved and the district so graciously paid in May of 2021. We were required to earmark 20% of the ESTHER 3 allotment specifically for learning loss. That was a non-negotiable and only applicable to ESTHER 3 funding, and so that totaled $6 million, and the use of the monies to address learning loss are fairly broad in nature, but intended to be specifically dedicated and not negotiable in making sure that we are doing everything that we can to close the learning loss gaps. Indirect cost is a cost that is required of all federal programs. Basically, they pay that money back to the district to cover the overhead cost of managing a federal program. That is also a calculation that is required by DPI. We don't have any discretion in that regard. So if you add all of those planning and budget commitments that were approved back in April up together, you'll see that the total planned spending equals the allotment that was funded to us through DPI. So we don't have any unspent or unplanned funding available at this point. So what does that mean? When our planned spending equals the allotment that has been funded, any change to that planned spending will require either one of two things. Either we didn't spend as much as we projected that we would spend, right? Because these are all estimates, and estimates aren't always 100% equal to the budget. Or we will have to make a decision about what not to fund that is currently working in our planning budget in order to make room to fund something different. Doesn't mean it can't be done. I've been a part at my previous district of several budget amendments, and we were successful in receiving approval for those budget amendments, but there is a process, and unfortunately it's not as easy as picking up the phone and calling someone at DPI and saying, we'd like to do this instead of that. We have to submit it through DPI's system, and normally the turnaround is anywhere from 10 to 14 days. They're working on those as quickly as they're staffed to do so on their end. The challenge for us, as I mentioned, is that most of our ESTHER 2 and ESTHER 3 dollars have at this point been committed to funding positions, and so that makes it challenging about what not to fund, because if we aren't going to use ESTHER 2 and ESTHER 3 monies to fund these positions as indicated in our planning budget, then we're going to have to figure out how to fund them otherwise. And so again, not something we can't consider, and we've started to dig into that a little bit over the past week. About 80% of those 98.5 positions are already filled, so that means 20% aren't. So there's an opportunity to talk about that, but I'm just now getting my arms around exactly what is available, either because we didn't spend as much as we thought we were going to spend, because our actual was below our projected, or if we have some positions where we have not filled them yet, and perhaps we could redirect or repurpose some of that money if that's what we collaboratively decided to do. So with that, I hope that helps provide an overview of our ESTHER funding, and working every day to get more acquainted with what we have done and what possibilities there are to do different things, and just want to make sure that we all remember that to do so, we do have to go through a formal process with DPI. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So, Carol, before I open the floor to the board members, I didn't open the meeting with what the real reason we were here tonight, because I knew you would be able to explain it.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. That was me. And the reason I did it is because with you starting with that, everybody now understands why we're here. Is to get the ESSER, and if you will, for the viewing audience, I know we use a lot of acronyms, and most people know that's COVID money from federal, but if you'll explain just a little bit to our viewing audience, what is ESSER?
So ESSER actually is an acronym for Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Funds. And these are actually federal dollars from our federal government that were provided to each state in our nation to help not only school districts, but state and local governments to react to the increase in cost related to the pandemic. So they're specifically earmarked to address challenges for government agencies, including school districts, to be sure that there was plenty of funding to support all the incremental cost and task and challenges that we've all faced during the pandemic.
So, correct, and with that, the challenge now that we're facing, that's more so than we've had in the past as we've moved through this, is our teacher issues, our teacher shortages, our substitutes. You know, we've all acknowledged that it's a time that we have to look at something innovative, creative, and within that discussion, that's what we've asked, is where are our ESSER funds at? What can we do? What's left? You know, are any of those line items able to be reallocated? So let's move through this. The first part, we want to break it down just a little bit more, some of those line items, so that we understand a little bit better where did the monies actually go. Some of those are a little bit more identifiable to us as board members than others. So let's go back to the slide that looked at the professional development. Okay, so that's a $330,000 line item. So can you define that just a little bit deeper in the details?
So, thank you, yes. All of these costs are going to either be a 2 or 3 year commitment, because if you're using either ESSER 2 or ESSER 3 money, giving those spending deadlines that I mentioned, we are making sure that we load in a multi-year commitment here. So that would have been a 3-year funding commitment. And that's an estimate, and that is a fully loaded estimate that includes base salary plus the district share of benefits, primarily retirement costs, which you all know are escalating, FICA, and the cost of our state health care plan.
So that looks like that's one new position.
It is.
Okay, so can you, I mean, to the viewing audience, $330,000, especially for one new position. Can you redefine that just a little bit
So
better?
it would be about $110,000 all in cost for one position. And that was a guesstimate because we didn't know who we would hire to fill that position.
A year for those 3 years, correct?
$110,000 per year for 3
That
years.
330, you just look at that's a
Not 1 year, 3
encompassing
years.
number, right? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
3-year cost.
Okay, great.
And excuse me, Mrs. Rimden, and Holly, excuse me, Ms. Herndon, just to repeat what you just said, just so folks understand this, that 110,000 is including, it's not just salary, it's salary and all the benefits that go with it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, and then if we move to second slide, which is the 6% one-time bonus for classified staff. Not everyone is familiar with who are classified. We've heard certified, non-certified, and you know the majority of the people in education understand that. But with classified, can you define classified, and then do you have a breakdown of actually what was given to each one of those classified people and who that identifies to?
So if I may, so I would ask Mrs. Herndon to answer the what is classified position, and then we're done with the presentation. I have the breakdown of the actual bonus pay that was given to all of the classified staff. All of them are in there. I can show it to you what the board allocated and approved, and we can go through that. But I'll ask Ms. Herndon to explain what classified staff is first.
So our classified staff, at a high level, are staff that are not paid on our teacher scales. So By contrast, certified staff are staff that are paid on our teacher scale that are licensed, whose salaries are mandated by DPI. Not only amount but step based on years of experience. And then our classified staff are those that are not. So that would include our bus drivers, our custodians, our principals in some cases, our assistant principals in some cases, folks that are here in the district office that are not paid on the teacher salary scales, TAs, school nutrition staff, those folks.
And DPI being the Department of Public Instruction. I know some of these
Yes, ma'am,
acronyms are
sorry.
just right, but we usually just say the state, that the salaries for those people are established by the state. It is not done locally. So that was great. That's a great way to say that.
For certified staff,
certified,
yes ma'am. And then
correct.
for classified, DPI does give us a minimum and maximum for classified staff, but as long as we stay within that minimum and maximum, they delegate responsibility for developing the scales in between to the local board.
Perfect. Okay, and with that, I guess we will turn it over to Dr. Kapicki.
Okay.
Thank you, Dan. So when we talk about the $4.1 million or the 6% classified bonus, one-time bonus that was approved back in April of 2021, these are the 1,786 employees that received bonuses and what those totals were. Now, clearly I can't show you everything in a small snapshot, but it gives you an idea of what the bonuses were across the board, who the person was, what their job code was, and what the gross pay was. So 6% based on gross pay would be the bonuses that the folks received. So again, the board definitely took their time in making sure that employees across the district were awarded a bonus. And Mrs. Herndon already spoke to you about the 10% to 12% local supplement increase for the teachers that was included in the presentation also as well. So the board has done a nice job of making sure that our employees have been rewarded with bonuses throughout the district, and you've done it in many different creative ways, and this is one of them. And this again covers, as I said, 1,786 employees, which is nearly half your employees across the district. And we've talked since I've been here about different bonuses that we've approved and allocated as well. So again, we're just showing you this in a brief way so you understand that many of the people that were in the district were given bonuses, and you see how it covers many different departments and areas and personnel. And again, Cabarrus County was probably the leaders in handing out this bonus pay for our employees, because I think many followed after your lead.
So Dr. Kapicki, just to reestablish the initial slide that stated the 6% one-time bonus pay was for classified staff, and these are identified here, which captures administration, teacher's assistant, bus drivers, child nutrition, those. And then the other piece of the slide was the supplement that was increase from a 10% to a 12% for the actual teachers, correct?
That is correct. And the total here you're looking at roughly is $3.5 million, but that does not assume the FICA cost. So you're looking at very close to the $4.1 million that you allocated. If there's anything left, when I say left, if there's any of the money that has not been assigned, it's a very small pot of money. So again, to Mrs. Hernan's point, we're kind of drilling down to see, when she showed you the three buckets, ESTHER 1, ESTHER 2, and ESTHER 3, you'll see that the first bucket, that's been allocated and spent. Second bucket, which is a little over $13 million, 53% of that has been allocated and spent. And then the third bucket, which I believe was $29.7 million, has been allocated to the tune of 21%. So and Mrs. Herndon did a great job in breaking down, explaining to you like where the money, where it was approved and where it was set up to be spent in the 98 different positions. But it just needs some time for us to go through to see where those allocations were and how much of the actual money was spent. I want to be very clear, there's no grand amount of money left here. This money has been allocated and spent, but there may be some small pockets here or there that we can allocate or as Mrs. Herndon again pointed out, go through DPI and make the appropriate changes if possible. So with that, I would also say some of the things, one of the reasons we're here is our teachers. We've talked to you many times about our teachers and our substitutes and the absences and the fill rates. When our teachers go out, automatically go into our substitute pool, and we call that our fill rate. We try and fill all of our open positions with substitute teachers that are in the pool of Cabarrus County. Once we exhaust that, we then basically put it to principals to cover classes. And I would say 9 out of 10 times, maybe 10 out of 10 times, the people that are covering your classes at that point then become your teachers. And that's what we've been talking about. Our teachers are going above and beyond in the classroom, along with others, but it is mainly our teachers. I'll be clear about that. It's no disrespect to anybody else that may be covering classes. But the point is showing the slide is we did give out bonuses to many people across the day. It wasn't just one group of people. It was spread out amongst all of our employees. Again, 1,786 employees is a large amount of employees in the district. So people did get a bonus. But our teachers continue to cover classes and continue to miss prep times that they need to prepare for their classes. And we're asking them to go above and beyond what they normally do. And to their credit, they have been incredible in answering the bell. They're there, they cover the classes, they do it without complaint, they make sure that our kids are taken care of, they deliver top-notch instruction, and they continue to rise again and again. So that's the kind of the conversation we're talking about. How can we possibly incentivize them a little bit more to say, hey, you know what, we hear and we see and we acknowledge the great work they're doing on the classrooms, and we would like to provide you with an incentive for covering those classes that normally I don't want to say they would never be covering, but they would not be covering at the rates they are right now due to the shortage of subs. Obviously, COVID has caused us an absentee rate that we haven't seen in many years. And all the other things that kind of go with the pandemic environment. So it's a very unique situation that we're dealing with under very extraordinary circumstances. And that's the point I want to make. I am only talking about our teachers that I want to incentivize for covering the classes that they're doing right now. I think working with Mrs. Herndon and her knowledge and her background and her grasp of the financial picture of the district that we can do that. So that's kind of why we're here. That's one of the reasons why we're here this evening, and I want to make sure that we kind of put something into place to help our teachers. I fully believe that, listen, we're never going to be able to pay our teachers or anyone in our district enough for the great work that they do, but it's oftentimes, it's nice to, when you can, give a little acknowledgement their way for all the extra work that they're doing, and that's why we're here.
So before you move on to that, could we get Dr. Bish and Carol up to discuss the budget update?
Sure.
I wanted to ask for clarity for the spreadsheet we just looked at. There was a bunch of acronyms there.
Sure.
Can you just point out or clarify those acronyms for us?
Absolutely. So if I can't, I know my friend Dr. Bish can, or Mrs. Herndon can as well. So obviously trans is transportation. And Mrs. Herndon, or Dr. Bish, if I'm wrong, please correct me. Tech would be our technology specialist, TA are our teacher assistants. Our principals are the PRIN. These are office staff 12 months. We see off 12. Off 10 will be office staff 10 months. Nutrition 10 months. Maintenance. I'm not 100%. Kids Plus. I thought so, wasn't sure. Our deans, our custodians, and that would cover the 12-month and the 10-month positions. Our nutrition folks. Our cabinet administration. Our bus drivers. And our auxiliary folks. So each job code kind of highlights as to where they are. Does that answer your question, Ms.
It does,
Sanders?
thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like to present the budget update, as far as the budget that was approved? What's going to take place for pay?
Sorry.
That's
We've
okay.
talked about several budgets
I
tonight.
know,
Thank
I'm
you
sorry. I
for
should've-
getting my brain back on the
Too
same.
much of that this time of the year. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So, and certainly I want Carol to speak to this. In the budget that was passed in December, there were bonuses for school system employees. There is a maximum of $2,800 that employees could receive. Now, there are several categories within that. There is the first one, which is $1,000. And so Carol, her department has been working on getting this and getting it done and getting it ready to go out and looking at which one applies to whom. But the total maximum per employee was $2,800. So Carol, do you want to kind of talk through what your department's been doing in terms of figuring out who gets what and by when?
Sure. The $2,800, the breakdown is, first of all, the state-approved budget supported a premium pay benefit to all staff within school districts. And the level of premium pay is $1,000 if you make more than $75,000. It's $1,500 if you make less than $75,000. Both termed premium pay, and to be paid to all district employees. So that's the first piece. On top of that is a $300 teacher bonus that goes to all teachers and instructional support staff. And on top of that is another $1,000 that is available to all teachers and instructional support staff that participated in a training or PD course that was related to the prevention of COVID and or the ability to remote teach and understand how to take on remote learning in the face of COVID. And that training could have occurred anywhere from like March 12th, 2020 until December 31st, 2021. And
How many
so-
hours was that training?
Pardon?
How many hours was that training?
Oh, I don't know how many hours. It wasn't specified how many hours. It was just they had to attend some type of training in those two, prevention of COVID or remote instruction.
So there's not an hour requirement to attend it?
They, DPI's translation of what the General Assembly intended, and they got support of that through presenting their allotment formulas to the State Board of Education, was that they were going to give a lot of discretion to each individual school district to summarize the eligible training, but we were not given a number of hours to follow. So I think that's all of the components that add up to a maximum of $2,800, depending on what position you hold within the district. And then you might recall that that's in addition to the average 2.5% increase in certified staff pay scales, and that varies depending on if you're, at a 0 year of experience or at a 25 plus year of experience. I think the percentage increase range was anywhere from 1.3% to 5.4% with an average of 2.5%. And then on the classified side, the approved budget provided for a move of all classified staff to either $13 per hour as a minimum wage or an increase of 2.5%, whichever was greater. So those are all the different, and that included retroactive pay back to July 1, 2021. However, we were instructed by DPI and the General Assembly that we would not pay that like we normally pay retro pay when we have a late approved state budget. We normally do that in November or December of the calendar year when the budget was approved. But because this budget was so late to approval, they said you're going to pay that as a one-time payout of retro pay sometime in the first quarter of 2022. So we have been spending all of our time since that budget was approved in payroll, understanding who was eligible for each component of that bonus, calculating retro pay, making the new scales effective January 1, 2022, so that we could make sure that our employees benefited from all of those budget provisions sooner versus later. And we're very close to having all of that finalized in the next couple of weeks.
So, Carol, do you know when they can expect to see that in their paychecks? Do you have an idea?
We don't have confirmation on the retro pay yet because that requires an adjustment to our software system to be able to execute a one-time lump sum retro payment, because again, we've never done that in the past, but our intention is that all the bonuses will be paid out by January 31st.
You know that's going to be one of the first questions everyone's going to want to answer to.
We want to send out a communication, and we want to do it comprehensively and include the retro piece. And so we are in a conversation, I believe Thursday of this week, with our software vendor to nail down their update to the package to make sure that we are ready to roll. But we've done all the preliminary work to be ready to run it through our system. We just need validation that they've been able to tweak their utility to accommodate.
Okay, so this is really good information for everyone to get. So the gist of what we've just covered is with the ESTHER monies, that first phase is what we've done already. The state is what they're getting ready to do, and that takes us up to now. Now we'll turn it back over to Dr. Pickey to give us our recommendation for what he would like to add for tonight for what we can do to assist with the teacher situation.
So I guess I want to understand the question clearly. I think what I would like to ask the board is, I would like to award the teachers an incentive, and I think we can definitely do that. I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth, but I feel confident that we could award our teachers a $1,000 one-time bonus for the fact that they're covering classes and for the fact that they're doing above and beyond and missing a lot of their prep time and covering us when our sub pool runs low. So that is what I would recommend to the board that we do. We do a one-time bonus. Now that cannot happen in January because, as Mrs. Hartnett just explained to you and Dr. Bish, there's a lot of back channeling that's going on with the state budget and getting us caught up to speed on that. And I also don't want to put their feet to the fire and say it's February. I think that it would be reasonable to say the earliest we could do that would be February, the end of the month, and the latest would be the end of March pay. It's either February or March, and I would have to have some more discussion with Mrs. Herndon and Dr. Bish to make sure that I understand the date of that, and I can report back to the board if it's going to happen, I can report back to the board at the February meeting as to when the actual date would be, whether it be end of February or the end of March. But that would be my recommendation to the board. And this way I think we show, the board, as you have from the beginning since I've been here, all I know is you asking me how can we help teachers and how can we have that discussion almost every meeting, how can we show our appreciation for the teachers, reward our teachers, let them know that we care. And this doesn't solve all the problems, and it's not going to put away any of the issues and pressures that we're dealing with right now, and I don't need to tell you that because you deal with it every month. But I do think it would be an appropriate way to say to our teachers, look, you're covering classes, you're going above and beyond your own duties, you're missing your prep times, you're stepping up to the plate when we need you, and we appreciate it immensely. And I think it would be, a good sign, a good faith gesture to our teachers to say, hey, you know what? Thank you for all you're doing, and we appreciate it. So that would be my recommendation.
Okay, so with that, I will open up the floor. Ms. Carpenter, I will start with you.
One question, is it just for teachers, or would it be teachers and TAs, or just teachers plain?
So again, I want to be clear on that. I'd like to reward everybody across the district money, right? But I think I want to be clear, I'd like to reward everybody a bonus, but that's not feasible and it's not possible. And there's only X amount of dollars in the budget, right? There's only X amount of dollars that we have. And that was the purpose of kind of showing you the initial allocation of the ESTHER fundings. You did already reward a lot of people bonuses. And I'm not saying that it'd be nice to give everyone a bonus. But right now, in the extraordinary instructional points that we're doing, and some of our teacher assistants are covering classes, but it's not feasible to say we can cover everybody. Our teachers are missing prep time. And that's the time that they use to prepare for the classes they're going to teach, that they're not getting paid for. And this incentive would kind of be a way to cover that, and that's what I'm talking about. Others are covering, that's for sure, but they don't have prep time when they're preparing for the classes. And it's not to denigrate anyone that's covering classes, but it's our teachers that are going above and beyond and covering many of the classes, and they're missing that prep time. Any teacher will tell you prep time is that one thing you don't want touched. And again, it's that time period that we're taking away from them and asking them to cover, and to their credit, they're doing it.
Okay. And one other question, because this is in these ESSER funds they were talking about, part of it we're going to be hiring teachers. They were saying 59 teachers, and we've got such a teacher shortage. We're having trouble finding that. And so we're talking about finding money certain areas. It seems like if we can't hire teachers, that may be an area that we could look at, because we can't find teachers. So that may be an area that we would look at if we're looking for it, because we know that there's a shortage there. So that may be one area that we could look at, because we can't find them.
I'm going to just stop there for just 1 second just to say that's really one of the discussion items for the budget committee that they'll be discussing. I know that's not, you're not.
But I mean, because that is, we all know that that's
Right.
an area that we're looking at. So, but that could be an area, because again, we know that is an area that we're looking at. That's the only thing I can think of at this time. Thank you.
Mrs. Carpenter, to your point, you're absolutely correct that there is a shortage, and it's been exacerbated by the COVID situation. Pre-COVID, we were already short teachers. I want to be very clear about that. There's much research out there to look at and review that our country, across the country, in various spots in the country, various regions, they were already undergoing teacher shortages. So you're spot on that assessment. COVID has exacerbated it, and now the substitute pool is not. I don't want to mislead anyone and say that it was this large pool of teachers that was covering everything, but the need wasn't as great. We were still suffering even pre-COVID for substitutes, and we need them desperately. And I would encourage anyone that can to substitute. But you're absolutely correct that we need to continue to seek out ways that we can hire more teachers and find more teachers to place in the classrooms. So I thank you for that.
Ms. Blackwell?
I'm just going to say that I'm so happy that this is something that we can offer to the teachers. I appreciate you guys working to give us the breakdown on how the ESSER funds were already allocated for the bonuses that we had previously approved. So that's good. I'm glad that everyone was able to get that. I hope that this is just a little bit of show our appreciation for what the teachers have had to give up as far as covering classes and their prep period. So, I'm just really grateful that we can do this, and I hope this really lets them know how much we appreciate them.
No, and I appreciate that, and I thank the board for your conversation, you initiating a lot of this conversation. The board deserves a lot of credit for consistently asking me, how can we help teachers? And I think the other credit, I'm just here answering your questions. You know, Mrs. Herndon has done a yeoman's work in terms of getting the budget updates and numbers to you. And then Dr. Bish has really stepped up to the plate and given that personnel breakdown. So really the credit goes to other people. I'm the messenger, but I do appreciate the board's support, and I thank you for that.
Mr. Furr?
Yes, I'd just like to, thank all the people involved. Obviously, they went through a lot of work the last few days to try to get us to this point. And it's a shot in the arm, and, I know that they can use it. It's just another opportunity for us just to show our appreciation. And then, their work does not go unnoticed. I know sometimes it seems like it does, but we're paying attention, and I appreciate you guys for doing whatever it takes to be creative and to make this happen.
We appreciate your observations and your input too, Mr. Furr, and thank you for that support.
Mr. Walter?
How many teachers?
Do not quote me on this number. I know it's around 2,000. I've seen reports of 2,059. I've seen reports of 2,079. It depends on the day. And I always say that because it just depends on, at any given day what's taking place. I would say a fair snapshot is 2,000 teachers. Dr. Bish, I would
$2
be
million,
close,
is
correct?
that what this?
Okay. Yes, you're talking about $2 million.
$2 million.
That's accurate.
Not including benefits. We'd have to add benefits.
Correct.
2,500,000, 3 million?
2.5 to 3. We need to price it all out.
All right. I guess I have a couple more questions, but more on if we have, a 10% vacancy rate, so all these 92 positions are not all filled. Is that correct?
Clarify the question for me a little bit. I think I know what you're asking. I just want to make sure I understand.
I'm saying we've got 92 positions here in this that are funded by ESTHER for the next 3 years, right? And right now
Correct.
you're not filling. Not all those positions are filled, so that's salary money you are not spending.
So that's the question. So that's a great question. So what we're saying to you tonight is here's ESTHER 1, here's ESTHER 2, here's ESTHER 3. This is the percentage that's been allocated and already spent. Here's what's left. That's what we're going through to make certain that those positions that the money was allocated for have been filled. And we're not 100% certain that we know that many of them, if not all, have been filled. But there may be a handful, to your
But
point.
there's
Maybe
like people like we're saying,
Yeah, it could be
we're having a hard
92.
time filling positions right now.
it could be
So there's
92.
obviously some of those positions that are funded that are not being spent right. It's not being spent right now.
It's possible. You have a high rate of those monies that were assigned with the ESSER fundings that you're spending that money as you assigned.
Right, but there's
But
still.
there should be, again, I can't quote you that number right now because we want to do our, as we said last week before this meeting, we want to make sure we cross T's and dot I's, that we give you specifics and that we're exact. I don't want to say it's $1 million or $2 million or 500,000 because that's what we're finding out right now.
Right, I mean, if it can get to the 2 million, I'm all in favor of that.
Correct. So if you looked at the money that was allocated and you break down the bonuses, it was 3.5 before FICA funding, right? So it's fair to say there may be a couple $100,000 there, but exactly what the number is, I don't know because we have to drill down and dig in.
Sure.
So that would be a pocket that we could take that, and then Mrs. Herndon could work with maybe possibly that's a piece of the pie that would fund this incentive, right? But again, there's things that we have to do, and there's forms we have to fill out to make sure that to reallocate that money appropriately. The other place you'd be looking to be honest with you, is your fund balance.
See, there's another concern, because you've hired 92 people. and
I
it's
didn't hire them. I'm just telling you what was
We're
reported.
intending to hire 92 people, and this is not a permanent funding source. So we've got to pay
That's
those
correct.
folks if they're going to stay here beyond those 3 years.
That's correct.
So
And in the presentation, was given-
Allocating a fund balance before knowing how we're going to keep them employed, that's kind of concerning. I don't know if I think we need to figure that one out first.
and I'm not saying hit it. I'm just saying it's a possibility. The other thing is that the way the presentation was given back in April of 2021, the funding was, they looked to the normal attrition rate and the growth rate as possibility to slide those positions into where possibly an
Which
attrition
means
or leave. So
you fund a position
you'd have
instead
a
of
zero
adding somebody for growth, so that's not necessarily great for
It'd be a neutral
lowering
effect.
class sizes.
I'm not arguing with you on that. I agree with you on that, but I'm just telling you how it was done.
Right, I
And
see,
I'm
I
not- I'm not-
understand. I mean, that was the plan, that's the hope. And that's an option. And then we're also asking the county to fund that teacher supplement increase from 10% to 12%, right?
Well, the first 3 years of that, as you'll see again in the April 2021
Right,
account.
but we don't want that to drop off. We want to continue
No, you're
the
correct.
12%, and that's going to require the county to fund that extra amount.
At the end of the 3-year period, there's going to be an accounting for that. You're absolutely correct.
So I, again, want to have that conversation before I kind of go towards fund balance. But again, if it's ESSER funding, if there's available, I think that is a good way to reward our teachers. And my last question had to be with the letters training. Is that an additional thing the state pays for? Or is that something we got to come up with? The bonuses for the teachers taking
So
that?
Dr. Hill could speak specifically to that, but my understanding on that is that's training, professional development, that the state has funded the materials for that. We don't cover that, correct, Dr. Hill? And then the rest of the time would just be time that we already have in district time during our professional development period. So there's no additional cost to the district on that training, correct?
The teachers don't think get a $500
Yeah, I'll
bonus
let-
of
I'll
some
let
sort
Dr.
for
Hill
taking that, or is
She
that?
could speak to the specifics on that.
Yes, you are correct. There was a $500 bonus that was paid out of the ESSER funding.
Oh, so that was
for-
ESSER funding too, okay.
For letters, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
But all other costs for letters are not funded out of ESSER. The only thing for letters was the $500 bonus that we gave to our teachers for participating.
Okay.
Ms. Sandage?
Thank you, Dr. Hill.
So thanks for the presentation. I'm always a proponent of giving our teachers and our staff incentives, especially in the times that we are in right now. However, today I became a little more confused than I wanted to be, so I've got several questions, and if they need to be answered at a later date, please let me know. So I've been in a few trainings to help me understand and grasp big budgets, and when we talked about COVID, I kept hearing the American Rescue Plan. So can somebody help me and possibly the viewing audience understand the difference, or if there's any difference between this ARP and ESSER funding?
So each of the three ESSER funding buckets have a subtitle, if you will, and the American Rescue Plan is American Rescue Plan is the subtitle for ESSER 3.
Okay.
ESSER 1 is CARES Act, and ESSER 2, I can't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, I can't remember. I can get that back to you, but it's just a sub-branding for those three buckets.
Okay. The other question I had is similar to what Rob just asked, and I'm just going to flat out ask it. So who will foot the bill once ESSER funds have been spent? And it doesn't look like we have the answer to that. I would be concerned there too. So we've got a supplement that we've added, and we're hoping that somebody's going to pick that up. And then we have positions that we've added, and we don't know where that's coming from. I'm concerned there, so I hope that we'll be discussing that further. So until those folks can be hired, and this speaks to what Ms. Carpenter, I believe what she was saying. So until those folks can be hired, what is that money doing? Is it just sitting there? Are we using it for something else? And then let's just say those folks are hired. Are they getting that back money? I hope I'm making sense here.
You are.
Okay,
You are.
so can you help me understand that?
Well, first of all, let me just back to your point about sustainability of not only the 12% local supplement for teachers, but also funding these positions that are currently ESSER funded. The conversation, if I recall correctly from my readings, that was shared with the board back in April is that in addition to a strong partnership with our county to make sure they understand the funding challenges that we might be up against in that regard, that we normally have attrition, as we just talked about, unfortunately, every year. And also, our county and our district is blessed with student growth. And so both attrition as experienced historically, and student growth will help us be able to fund and sustain the funding for those costs going forward. And you're correct, I have to stay very close to that. I have to have conversations with the county. I have to understand what kind of allotments might be coming to us in the future from Raleigh, from the state. And while I don't have my arms completely around that, I've jumped in all force, and I recognize that challenge, and I'm equally concerned that we come up with a solid plan to fund those positions and that supplement going forward. We won't go backwards. We'll figure it out and we'll find a way. So I just want you to know and understand that that's at the top of my list. Now back to your other question about, can you restate it? Sorry, I got off on my soapbox.
So until the folks are hired, like
Oh,
what
yes.
happens to those funds? And then when they are hired, like what happened to the, the funds that were sitting
Right, so
there?
we can't do anything different with that funding in the interim because, again, in order to do that, we would have to go back to the state and ask for a budget amendment. So we can't do anything differently while we wait to hire. It's my understanding that we aggressively went after hiring those resources because the need was so great at our school level, both from a learning loss and a mental and social wellness gap perspective. There has been some time. Obviously, you can't bring 98 and a half people on board that quickly. And just so you know, we get an allotment of funding, but for any kind of state or federally funded positions, we have to, for lack of a better word, order money to pay them. So it's not like they give us that money and we put it in a bank account and we earn interest on that. We have an allotment to cover, but we get money from the state and federal governments to cover it as we spend it, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
That's
so
all.
I guess that further expands on my question. So we're not using that money, and we're saying that we're going to go and, present a different plan to DPI. Are we considering that money that hasn't been spent, or we have been unable to spend? Okay, so that answers
Yes,
that
ma'am.
answers my question.
What we need to first do is reconcile what we have spent, and we know what that is, what we think we will spend, if we are going to fill all those positions, if we still think it's a priority to fill all those positions. And that's the work that we need to do, as Dr. Kopicki mentioned, to reconcile what we could repurpose to help to fund some type of incentive to our teachers.
Okay. So when you talk about submitting to DPI, how long does it take for us to identify where we could utilize money differently, and then to send that to DPI, and then to disperse wherever it's going?
I never want to speak on behalf of the state with regard to timing, but I feel fairly comfortable that we could do what we need to do, submit our budget amendment to the Department of Public Instruction, and get their approval within a 2-week time frame. But please don't hold me to that, because I'm not in control of how long it takes on their side. But that's been my experience, within 2 weeks.
Okay, and I meant to say this beforehand. I'm so sorry you're getting all of these questions and you're
I
new.
don't mind. That's my job. No problem.
Yeah, I just didn't want, I know it's pretty egregious, but I'm sorry. So can you tell me, like, for example, the percentage of classes covered by teachers, and this might be for Dr. Kopicki.
I do not have that information.
So we're saying that, like, we're going to pay only teachers, but our classes have been covered by various individuals. So do we know, you said it's, I don't know, 90% of our teachers have covered classes? Because if we are justifying just paying teachers and everybody has been covering, I just want to make sure we're clear.
So you have other people covering classes as well, but the bulk of the work is being done by your teachers. And then again, I'm going to emphasize, they're doing it during their prep time. So that is precious time that they're losing, that they need to prepare to teach in the classrooms.
And does that differ from what we're going to talk about at our retreat, from the substitute, when they cover classes, giving them some type of stipend when teachers or TAs or whoever, is there a line between there, or this is in addition to?
It's my understanding that there is no pay when they cover,
Right,
their
but-
classes, they're not paid for it. When they cover classes, they're not paid for it. They're just asked
Right.
by the principals to cover when they cover. So they're not reimbursed for it.
But we talked about this last week.
Which is
and
why,
we're-
right, exactly, and you had asked that question. So again, we're here tonight to say to you in answer to one of your inquiries, well, we think we can incentivize them a little bit, and that would be my recommendation to that
So
question.
in lieu of the stipend
Yeah, so
for
this would be a
covering
one-
classes.
Right, exactly. We did look at stipend, but a stipend would be too cost prohibitive to do. You're too big, you're too large, there's too many teachers, it just would be cost prohibitive, it would not be feasible.
Okay.
But a one-time incentive would be feasible.
Okay. And then the list that you showed us of folks who have already been paid out with ESSER funds or given bonuses from ESSER funds, is this in addition to any grants that have been applied for? I know we listened to Kids Plus applied for a grant. I know the cafeteria staff have been given additional funds. There's been different departments that you guys have presented have gotten
Right.
funding. Is this in addition to that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And clear on that, those funds don't go to our teachers, just to be clear on that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
understood that, but I know we've gotten various
Yep.
presentations, and I just wanted to know if the ESSER funds that you broke down here were in addition to those grants.
That's accurate.
Okay. The last question I have, I think, as long as you answer and I don't have more questions from this one, is, so I'm a little confused at what's going to happen on January 31st, and then what we are going to wait for to see if we can do it in February or March.
Sure, I'll clarify that. So by January 31st, our intention is to pay the bonuses that are outlined in the provisions of the state-approved budget. So that's the up to $2,800 that Dr. Bish and I shared. What might be paid after that, but within the time frame allowed by Raleigh to do so, is the retroactive adjustment back to July 1st, 2021 of salary increases. So not the bonuses, but base salaries. Whether you're a certified staff member, the average increase is 2.5%. If you're a classified staff member, it's the greater of moving you to $13 an hour or 2.5%.
So that was already, I'm sorry.
That budget provision is effective all the way back to July 1st, 2021. So we have to capture that and pay that in a lump sum payment to our staff between now and March.
And that was already coming to them.
Yes, ma'am. That's part of the state-approved budget.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Mr. Furr?
Yeah, I got something you can clarify for me. So the teachers didn't get to 6%, right? And that's why we're trying to do something, part of the reason we're trying to do something now. Just wanted to clarify that. And another thing that we need to understand and be on the forefront of our minds is the fact that some of these positions y'all are talking about hiring is for learning loss, am I correct? Which, as a board, that ought to be the top of what we should be concentrating on. You know, our New Year's resolution should be enough of this COVID, enough of this mask, let's get on to business and take care of the learning loss. And if it means hiring more people, and to me, there's no price tag you can put on what we've done to these kids in the past couple of years. So I just want to make, at least that's my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the board feels like, but that's what we've got to concentrate on. But I just wanted to add that.
And just to clarify earlier, ESSER 2 is the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or they refer to it as the CRRSA, C-R-R-S-A. They're all acronyms. So that was what they called ESSER 2.
Thank you. And just to add to what you said, Tim, I agree. But I would add our mental health for everybody, our teachers, our students, our staff. We need to be focusing on learning loss and mental health.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. I had that wrote down to add to the learning loss, so thank you.
And then
I'm sorry. I already did.
I had one follow-up.
Okay.
How are we measuring learning loss?
Right now, I don't think that I could stand here and say to you, I can give you 100% feedback on all of learning loss. I know Dr. Hill could probably speak to that a little bit. I know that in our classrooms, our teachers through their reading assessments, through their formative assessments, through some of the summative assessments. We could definitely take a look at that as well. I wouldn't be able to say to you specifically this is how we're measuring all kids across the district. Dr. Hill, would there be anything you'd add to that? And how we're accurately measuring learning loss across the district 100%?
We are using our 18-19 data, which is our pre-COVID data, to benchmark against. So we are doing the things that we have traditionally done in terms of looking at formative assessments, as Dr. Kopicki mentioned, quarterly assessments. I meet with every principal at the end of every quarter to review their quarterly assessments. And right now we're on track to meet or exceed about half of our EOCs and EOGs where we were in the 18-19 school year. So each individual student has a predicted assessment score from EVOS. And so each school takes a look at their predicted score compared to how they're performing on their current benchmark, and they measure that on a quadrant. So we're looking at the individual growth of each student and also the individual growth of each school as compared to 18-19, because we believe that last year was an anomaly. It's not something to benchmark against.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I've asked Ms. Adcock, she's with us online, but she has a case of laryngitis, and so she's texting me, and she does not have any questions. She said everyone did a really good job of asking. And board members, this is what we can do tonight is we can take action. We can amend the agenda to authorize Dr. Kopicki to apply that one-time bonus of $1,000 for each teacher. We can take this up at the February agenda. The whole reason for having this tonight is to give him some type of, we've all stated that we've got issues critical right now, and maybe not critical, it's probably a strong word, and I asked not to use that. But we need to address the situations. We know that teachers are on the front lines, and they're really struggling. So we do need, the statements that I had made, it's hard to be board chair sometimes when you're responding to the media, because my statement that day was, we have substitutes, we have teachers, we have lots of challenges, and if that statement had been made, it would have finished my sentence. And we do, and we recognize that. So we as a board have said, okay, what can we do to address that? And it's much, much better, instead of talking about what the issues are, and to come up with positive solutions and working with our staff to address that. And that's what we're here for tonight. So I would just like to ask each of you, are you willing to amend the agenda to take action tonight? Would you like me to add it to the February agenda to get additional information? It is at the request of this board for us to go ahead and address it, and that's why the called meeting was called. So I'll just start with Ms. Sandage and ask, what is your pleasure?
So I would like for us to go ahead and take action, but I just want to make sure that we are including in this, going back and looking to see where we can find money, just incentives for substituting or for finding substitutes.
We can go back and look. I just can't guarantee that we're going to come back and say to you that, we can do anything, but we would definitely take a look at that. That's not a problem.
Yeah, I do think that this $1,000 fixes the immediate issues that our teachers are facing, but I think, it's just a start. It's just a small start. Thank you.
Also, just to readdress Mr. Walter's question, I think Dr. Hill was very specific in some of the things that we're doing, especially looking at the EBOS data, but I think we can all comfortably say that it's, the goal of getting our kids back in school and having them back this year has been the priority. So as we continue to assess our students and find out where they're at, we're doing that on a daily basis. And I think that's another challenge for our teachers. If you think about it, in March 2020, they changed their profession like that because they were asked to flip a switch and become online teachers. And did that for all of last year, and now they come back into school, and we are trying to assess some of those issues and problems. And the board has mentioned this evening, we all know mental health is another issue that is kind of impeding some of the progress of our students as well. So there are many challenges that our teachers are facing, and they're doing a great job addressing those challenges. So to your point, the learning loss is compounded by some of the other things that are in play as well. And the COVID obviously has caused a lot of these issues for us and our teachers.
Ms. Adcock has just texted me that she's good with taking action. Mr. Walter?
Well, we didn't determine how we're going to pay for that, and this is a $2 to $3 million expense. and I'm not comfortable using fund balance for it, and you haven't been able to guarantee that we're using ESSER funds. So I think waiting until we get that information is the better thing to do. If a teacher gets a check tomorrow or if a teacher gets a check in a month, I don't think that's an emergency or it's going to change the lives of anybody. I'm obviously supportive of rewarding teachers for these extra efforts, but I do want to know how it's paid for.
I have a question about this point.
Sure.
So we're talking about 2,400 teachers, give or take, or 2,100 teachers, give or take, getting $1,000 by the 31st or so.
Roughly 2,000 teachers. Well, no, we said if you were to prove it, the earliest would be the end of February, the latest would be the end of March.
So we're not talking about millions of dollars being taken action on tonight. We're talking about like $2,400. Am I?
Oh, no. If you approve tonight to incentivize.
I mean, 24,000. I'm sorry.
I'm asking for $1,000 for each teacher, which would exceed somewhere between the $2 million and $3 million mark. That's correct.
So does that change your thoughts on it?
If it was just a $2,500 issue,
it's 21,000.
It's $2 to $3 million.
2,000 teachers, $1,000 incentive, plus the benefits on top of that. So you're looking at about between $2 and $3 million.
Oh, where am I going?
Okay.
So it's a big dollar amount.
Right. Okay, yeah, I read that completely wrong.
Okay, let me hear from the rest of the board before we continue that discussion. Mr. Farr?
Yeah, I'm ready to take action immediately. And another thing we need to think about too, when we talk about teachers having to fill in during their planning periods, you got to keep in mind when they do that, that takes away home life, because the time they usually spend at school trying to do that, they got to go home and do it. And they already do enough at home, and this just adds to that. So I'm ready to do whatever we can do. And here's the deal. I've been down here long enough, and Rob has too, but to understand that those people, our staff is not going to bring anything to us that they haven't vetted and talked about, and I'm sure they got a plan.
Ms. Blackwell?
I'm also ready to take action tonight.
Ms. Carpenter?
Well, one of the things we all know, we can't do anything unless we've got a budget amendment for it, and we've got to have money to pay for it.
We're just going to give them authorization to do exactly that. That's what this is about tonight. That's what the meeting is about.
Well, I mean, if they can find the money, I'm ready to take action on it, because I agree with everything that's been said. We need to do that. And I agree that we do need to do something on the subs, whether it's to up the rate of what the subs are making, but we do need to do something to incentivize the subs to either advertise it more, to say this is, we tried to do it at our last meeting, to tell people what the requirements are, or if it's just to increase that rate a little bit. But we definitely need to do something on that, because if we increase the subs, then the teachers wouldn't have to do it. So that's a win-win situation. So if we can work more on that, because I've gotten a couple emails from people that were interested and said, hey, if that rate was a little bit higher, I would maybe do it. So if we can just, get the word out a little bit more, I think that would help. And again, maybe just increase that rate just a little bit. That may help us get those subs. So I agree with Keisha on that. That would help our solution if we could get more subs. So I hope y'all will look in those rates. Thank you.
So board members, with that, I would ask, may I have a motion that we amend the agenda to add an action item for authorization to give Dr. Kopicki and his staff the authorization to address and discuss a budget amendment to include a one-time bonus payout of $1,000 for our certified teacher staff.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Motion by Ms. Blackwell, second by Ms. Carpenter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, now the motion has... Rob, I did not even do that. I'm not even used to y'all doing that, so let's do that one more time. All those in favor say aye. Aye. I want you to raise your right hand, please. Opposed? And Ms. Adcock, even though she's online with us, will not include her in the count, so it's actually 5-1 that it passes. Rob, I'm sorry, you made a statement and I didn't hear what you said.
My statement was it was not an emergency, and we haven't come up with a funding plan for this, so I can't.
Okay, well, this was just to amend the agenda. We need to have some training on amending the agendas for what we need to discuss. So this was just to amend the agenda. So you're still in opposition amendment? Okay, that's fine. And then, all right, now may I have a motion that we authorize Dr. Kopicki and his staff to move forward with looking at a budget amendment for a one-time bonus payout of $1,000 for our certified teachers.
I'll make that motion as well.
Motion on the floor by Ms. Blackwell, second by Ms. Sandage. All those in favor say aye, and please raise your right hand.
Aye.
And we have the same count of in favor. All those opposed? Mr. Walter, that's okay. That's okay. Motion passes 5-1. Dr. Kopicki, any questions for us?
No, ma'am, I appreciate the board's support on this, as I'm sure the teachers do as well. We will come back with the board and define exactly how we're going to do this. Thank you for your support and your help.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will ask that we have a motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry. I have one clarifying question. I feel like you've already answered this, but I just wanted to make sure. So in the ESTHER 3 funds, all of the funds have been allocated somewhere, right? They haven't been spent. What you're saying is of this money that we are looking for, we're going to look in this money that has not been spent and see if we can do something different with that. Send that request to DPI, wait for the approval. So does this wait on that?
So that is one of the options we're going to examine closely. So the answer to that question is yes. That's what we're going to look at first and see what, as was explained this evening, there are the 3 different buckets. 1 is gone. 2 and 3, there's still some money that has not been allocated, but we want to make sure that we understand where, if it all has or not. And then I can come back to the board and say, okay, this is what's left, or it has all been allocated, and this is what we recommend as a different plan, Plan B, if you will.
So if there's nothing left, it's either fund balance or asking the county to fund it.
So, Mr. Walter, let's hold that thought for just a moment, because I want to make sure that we don't confuse everyone. The
Can I
action
answer that question, Ms. Sanders? Thank you.
Sorry. The action that has just taken place is to authorize Dr. Kopicki to work with his staff to figure that out. That's what's going to come back to us. So I don't think we want to put words in their mouths of it will happen, it won't happen, or where is it coming from, how much do we have left, because that is their dilemma right now. It's just authorizing them to be able to come back to us with a recommendation for an amendment to either the ESTHER, hold please, for the ESTHER fund change, okay, or if we need to do something with our budget, which would incur the fund balance. But it's not a decision we're needed to make tonight. We just need to give them the authorization to look at it. That's all we're doing tonight.
And my point was have that plan in place before you come to the board.
Absolutely, but they've got to be told to do it right now. So that's what this is for tonight. So I just want to make sure the viewing audience understands that once we put a plan in place, whether it's our budget or the ESTHER funds, and that has been approved by the state, anything that goes outside of that or is changed or modified, then this board has to approve that piece as well. So thank you for asking us to do this tonight. I'm sure the teachers do appreciate all that we have looked at and are looking at now. Does anyone else have any other comment or question? Could you key up, please, Ms. Carpenter?
Don't need to recess. This mean they've already scheduled the meeting for Monday, or
Our meeting Monday is the special call for the motion on the mass vote.
Okay, so
Yes.
we don't need to just
No.
recess this.
No, this
Okay,
was a
thank
special
you.
call meeting just to address the recommendation for addressing the
So
teachers.
you're going to have a plan by Monday?
Mr. Walter?
Is that what we have?
No, there is going to be a meeting Monday is a special call meeting on the mask vote. So when we call a special call meeting, we can only address and talk about the item that we have placed before the media and advertised. Monday night's meeting is the mask vote.
Okay, so Madam Chair, when do we expect the report on how we're paying?
In
for
our
the
February meeting.
general meeting, okay.
And that's
Thank
what
you.
Dr. Kopicki discussed to begin with. Okay? So any other comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Furr and a second by Ms. Blackwell. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. And with that, we will say goodnight to our viewing audience and remind those that our planning retreat / work session has been canceled and will be rescheduled at a later date for this coming Saturday, January the 22nd. We will have a special called meeting this coming Monday, the 24th, that will be addressing the mandated mask vote. Thank you and good night.